Have you ever worked so hard to be seen and still felt invisible? Blake Harper showed up to the most important interview of her life, drenched from the rain. Her resume soaked and eyes tired from years of surviving quietly. No fancy degree, no connections, just grit, truth, and a hope that someone might finally see her for who she was. She sat across from a man known for his silence and sharp edges. One word from him could change her future, or erase it completely. What would you do if your one shot came on your worst day? Would you walk away? Or stay? Muddy shoes and all. This is not a story about romance. It is a story about dignity, about being brave when no one claps, and about what happens when silence finally speaks back. Stay. You might find yourself in her story. The rain had started around 5 that morning. At first, it was soft, barely more than a mist hanging over the rooftops of Seattle. But by 7, it had become a steady curtain of gray, slapping against windows, flooding gutters, and turning sidewalks into streams. Blake Harper stood at the corner of 12th and Pine, holding a cup of coffee that was now more rain than caffeine. Her jacket clung to her arms like wet paper. Her hair, which she had carefully twisted into a low bun an hour ago, had unraveled into frizzy strands, hugging her jaw. She checked her phone. The time blinked at her. 7:54 a.m. The interview was at 8, 6 blocks away. She inhaled slowly, trying to calm the tight feeling in her chest, but that only reminded her of the cold air pressing into her lungs. Then the worst thing happened. A cyclist skidded past her on the sidewalk, too fast, too close. His tires sliced through a puddle the size of a small pond. The water shot upward in a brown arc and landed squarely on her legs. One shoe slipped off in the splash and slid into the gutter. She froze. The cyclist shouted something that sounded vaguely apologetic, but he never looked back. People turned to look. Some chuckled. One woman gave her a sympathetic smile. Blake just stood there. Coffee dripping from her hand, blouse clinging to her back, one foot bare and soaked. She looked up at the cloudy sky. Really? She whispered, "This is how it starts." A man in a black Tesla across the street glanced at her as he rolled past. He wore a suit, crisp, clean, untouched by weather or chaos. He had the kind of face that looked like it never had to run in the rain. Sharp jaw, cold eyes. He glanced once, then looked away as if she were just another soggy distraction. Blake squinted. She did not know him yet, but he was the man behind the desk she was rushing to meet. Aiden Wells. She did not know that in just 10 minutes. She would be sitting across from him, tracking the faint twitch in his eyebrow as he scanned her mud-stained resume. Right now, she only knew she had a choice. She could go home, dry off, eat a stale muffin, and try again tomorrow, or she could walk into that building, soaked, shivering, missing one shoe, and show up anyway. Blake reached into her bag, found an old rubber band, and tied her hair back with shaking hands. She tossed the coffee in the trash, wiped her face with her sleeve, and limped forward. The shoe was gone. So be it. Every step felt heavier, not because of the water in her clothes, but because of what it all symbolized. She was 27, living in a one-bedroom apartment she could barely afford. Her last freelance gig had ended 3 months ago, and her savings were now a 3-digit number. She had applied for 47 jobs in the past 60 days. This was the first to call her back. She had ironed her blouse 3 times the night before, practiced answers in front of the mirror, Googled every detail about Greylight Media. She had wanted this moment to feel like a beginning. But now, walking into the lobby barefoot on one foot, carrying a soggy folder and a quiet sense of humiliation. It felt more like a bad punchline. The front desk receptionist looked up and blinked. Blake straightened her back. "I have an interview," she said. "Blake Harper." The woman blinked again. Yes. Please wait over there." Blake nodded and walked to the bench, careful not to leave a trail of rainwater across the polished floor. She sat down and tried not to look at the other candidates. They all looked perfect. Hair untouched, suits tailored, perfume lingering like confidence. She looked down at herself. Her sock was turning gray. Her resume was warped. And still, she was here. When the elevator opened and Aiden Wells stepped out, the room shifted, heads turned, people sat straighter. The click of his shoes echoed like punctuation marks. He paused in the middle of the lobby. His eyes scanned the room, then stopped on her. Blake met his gaze. Neither smiled. He looked at her like a mystery he had no time to solve. And then he walked past without a word. She exhaled. It did not matter. She had not come here to impress him with perfect hair or clean shoes. She had come to try, one more time. Even if everything around her said she should not. The receptionist called her name. Blake stood up, adjusted her bag, wiped her hands on her pants, walked toward the door with the words, "Executive Office, Greylight Media," etched in silver, and just before she entered, she whispered to herself, "You are not here to be liked. You are here to be real." She pushed the door open and walked into the unknown. The door clicked shut behind her. Blake stood still for a moment, letting her eyes adjust to the soft amber light inside the office. The walls were dark wood. A single, abstract painting hung above a low bookshelf. No clutter, no warmth. Everything felt sharp, minimal, controlled, and then there was him. Aiden Wells sat at the far end of the long desk. He did not rise when she entered. He did not smile. He looked at her the same way someone might observe a rain stain on a clean window. Curious, unimpressed, detached. She stepped forward, careful not to slip on the marble floor. He gestured toward the chair across from him. "Sit," he said. His voice was low, precise. It did not ask. It instructed. Blake sat, her sock squished slightly. She said nothing. For a moment, there was only the faint hum of the air vent. Aiden picked up her resume. It was damp. The edges curled like dying leaves. He did not comment on it. Instead, he flipped to the second page. "You studied art," he said. "Oil painting." She nodded. "Yes. I was interested in visual storytelling, how color can carry emotion." He looked at her, expression unchanged. "And now you want to work in corporate media." It was not a question. It was a statement. She kept her posture straight. "I want to tell stories. The platform is secondary." He tilted his head, almost imperceptibly. "You are aware this is an assistant position I am. You will not be telling stories. Maybe not. But I will be learning how they move." He looked at her for a long moment, then closed the folder. The silence stretched. Blake could hear the faint drip of water falling from her coat onto the polished floor. She wondered if she smelled like mildew or panic. "Do you know who I am?" he asked suddenly. She blinked. "Yes." "You are Aiden Wells, founder of Greylight, former executive producer at Vortex Channel. Named one of the 30 under 30. That was 8 years ago. Yes, but people still mention it." He did not respond. His fingers tapped once against the folder. "Why did you come today? Looking like that?" There it was. Blake did not flinch. There was a storm. I slipped, lost a shoe, got soaked, but I had an interview. You could have rescheduled. I could have. But the storm would still have happened, and I would still be me. Just drier. His brow twitched slightly. He leaned back in his chair, eyes never leaving her. What are you hoping to get from this job, Miss Harper? The question was standard, but the way he asked it was not. She hesitated, then spoke slowly. Stability, direction, the feeling of moving forward, even if it is just by answering your emails. He almost smiled. Almost ambitious. She shook her head. Realistic. He glanced at the clock on the wall, then at her. She did not know what he saw in that moment. The muddy pants, the trembling fingers, the way she refused to shrink. He picked up the folder again, then looked at her directly. Your GPA was average. You have never worked in an office. And your cover letter had 3 typos. She felt heat rise in her neck. Yes. So why should I hire you? She paused, then leaned forward. Just slightly. Because I will show up, no matter what. I will figure things out. I will not lie to you. And I will care about the work, even if it is invisible. Aiden said nothing. Then he stood. The chair did not creak. Of course it did not. He walked to the window, hands in his pockets. The city stretched below, gray, wet, blurred by mist. He turned back. We are not hiring a writer or a thinker. We need a function, a part in the machine. Blake stood too. I can be a function. I can also be a human. You get both. He studied her. The silence was longer this time. Then he nodded once. You will start Monday, 8 a.m. sharp. My assistant will email you the onboarding documents. Blake blinked. That is it. That is it. She swallowed. Thank you. He did not reply. She turned toward the door, but before she opened it, he spoke again. Miss Harper. She looked back. Do not be late. Her voice was steady. I never planned to be. Then she left. Outside, in the hallway, her knees almost buckled. But she kept walking, past the receptionist, past the perfect candidates, who now looked up in confusion. Out into the rain again. The air felt colder, but her chest was warmer. She had no idea why he hired her, but something in his eyes had shifted. Not much, just enough. And that was all she needed. Monday arrived. The sky was still heavy with clouds, but the rain had softened. Blake Harper stood in front of Greylight Media. Her hands were tucked into the sleeves of a dry coat. Her hair was pulled back, clean and steady. She wore the same pair of shoes she had found on sale 3 months ago. They were not stylish, but they were hers. She took a breath, and then walked in. Inside, the building felt like another world. Glass, marble, quiet steps, screens glowing softly on the walls. Everyone seemed to know exactly where to go. The receptionist barely looked up when she arrived. 22nd floor. She rode the elevator alone. The hallway was clean, cold. Her badge clicked softly as she held it against the door. A woman in a navy blue blazer greeted her. You are Blake. Blake nodded. I am Dana, the woman said. Human Resources. I will walk you through orientation. The next 40 minutes passed like a machine. Dana moved through forms, codes, emergency exits. The rules were clear. The language was careful. The warmth was missing. Then Dana handed Blake a folder. You will support Mr. Wells directly, she said. There is no secondary assistant. He prefers minimal contact and clean execution. Blake took the folder. Understood. His office is ready for you. At 8:01 a.m., she walked in. Aiden Wells was already seated. He wore a charcoal suit, no tie. His hands moved smoothly across a keyboard. He did not glance up. Blake stepped forward. "Good morning," she said. He motioned toward a stack of papers without lifting his eyes. "These need correction. Format and schedule. Before 10." She sat at the assistant's desk beside his. It was slightly lower, positioned to the left, not quite visible from the hallway. For the next hour, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were keys tapping, machines printing, and the soft rustle of paper. By 9:53, Blake placed the finished documents on his desk. Aiden reviewed them in silence, then nodded. He said nothing. At 10:40, she printed the wrong version of a proposal. At 11:15, she mixed up two names in a lunch appointment. He noticed both mistakes, but he did not raise his voice. He simply corrected them, then moved on. That was worse than yelling. By noon, she was in the kitchenette, staring out a small window while holding a paper cup filled with something that tasted like hot cardboard. Her shoulders dropped. She had dreamed of this job as a doorway, but now it felt more like a glass wall. She could see purpose on the other side, but she could not reach it. New face. A voice startled her. A woman leaned against the counter, mid-40s, confident posture, sharp eyes. "You are the new girl." Right. Working with the statue upstairs, Blake tried to smile. First day. The woman chuckled. "Hang in there. I lasted 4. He keeps everything, including people, at arm's length." Blake said nothing. But if you survive a week, something changes. No one knows why, but it does. Then the woman walked away. Blake finished the coffee and returned to the office. At 2:15, Aiden stood. "Follow me," he said. She followed him into the elevator, then down a back hallway she had not seen before. He led her into a dim room filled with lights, cameras, and large photos pinned to the wall. "This is our next campaign," he said. "What do you see?" Blake stepped closer. She saw portraits, not models, real people. Faces lined with age, worn eyes, gentle smiles. Each person held a small card with handwritten words. "I am still trying. I showed up. I am enough." She looked at Aiden. "These are people who lived through something," she said. "They are asking us to see more than the surface." He looked at her for a long second, then nodded. "Finish your day. Dana will handle the rest." He walked out. Blake stayed a moment longer. The images stayed with her. Later that evening, while riding the bus home, her mind wandered. She had made mistakes, felt invisible, heard whispers. But something about those photos, and the way he had looked at her, it made her think she might still belong here. Tuesday. She came in at 7:45. No one saw her. She liked that. By Friday, she had fixed 4 calendar issues, caught a typo in a draft sent to a client, replaced the coffee filter before anyone noticed it was burnt. Aiden still spoke very little. But on Thursday, when she handed him a schedule, he said, "Good timing, just that." And that was enough. The office was quieter than usual that Friday. Blake Harper arrived at 7:42 a.m. The hallway lights had just flickered on. Most desks were empty. Even the coffee machine still murmured its first cycle. She liked these moments, the hush before the day, the weight of time not yet spent. Aiden Wells was already in his chair when she walked in. He gave a short glance, said nothing. She placed the day's schedule on his desk, then returned to her corner, opened her laptop, and began reading through a batch of vendor emails. At 8:17, she heard his voice. "Cancel my noon call with Garrett. Move it to Monday." She nodded. By 9:30, he had not said anything else. He moved from email to draft, from draft to meeting, all with a quiet intensity that made the room feel smaller. At 11:45, the fire alarm rang, a test, scheduled, annoying. They stepped out with the rest of the floor, waiting near the elevators as the system buzzed overhead. Aiden stood apart, facing the window. Blake stood beside him, close, but not too close. She did not speak. After a long pause, he said, "You do not fidget." She blinked. "I do. Just not on the outside." He gave a slight nod. Then the alarm ended, and the building returned to order. At 12:03, they stepped into the elevator. Halfway down, the lights flickered, then everything stopped. The elevator froze between floors. The hum vanished. Blake gripped the side rail. The air felt thicker. Aiden pressed the emergency button. Nothing. They looked at each other, and then silence. Seconds passed, then a minute, then more. No voices from the speaker, no alarms, just stillness. Blake sat on the floor. Her hands rested on her knees. Aiden stayed standing, one hand in his pocket, the other tapping against his watch. "This might take a while," she said softly. He said nothing, then sat down across from her. Not close, not far, just enough. She studied the space between them. "It is strange," she said, "being stuck like this." He leaned his head against the wall. "Not the first time." She tilted her head. "You have been stuck in an elevator before." "No, but I know the feeling." His voice was quieter now. She nodded. They sat in silence again. Then Blake spoke. "When I was a kid, I used to get stuck in the back seat. While my mother ran errands, she said it was safer to lock the doors and leave me there. I remember watching people pass by, wondering if they even saw me." Aiden's eyes stayed forward. "She left when I was 12. Blake continued. "No note, just gone. I stayed with an aunt for a while, then couch to couch. But I always remembered those windows. Still." He said nothing, but something in his shoulders shifted. She continued. "Slower now. I think that is why I do not run, even when I want to, because I know how it feels when someone does." The elevator made a soft noise, then nothing again. Aiden finally spoke. "My mother died when I was 10. His voice had no edge, just fact. She was quiet, kind. My father was not—" He paused. "I used to hide in the laundry room. She would leave notes in the pockets of my clothes, tiny ones, folded like stars." Blake looked at him. "What did they say?" He met her eyes for the first time since they sat down. They said things like, "You are safe," or "I see you." Blake blinked slowly. Silence again. But now it was full of something else. Not tension, not emptiness. Understanding. After what felt like an hour, the lights flickered. Then the elevator moved. When they stepped out, no one said anything. But something had changed. He walked slightly behind her as they returned to the office. At the door, he paused. "You can take the rest of the day off," he said. She looked at him. "I would rather stay." He nodded, then walked in. She followed. The world outside resumed its pace. Calls, meetings, emails. But inside that small office, the silence had shifted. It was no longer distance. It was space. And sometimes, space is where people finally meet. Monday came again, but the air in the office felt different. Blake Harper noticed it as soon as she stepped into the hallway. The greetings were shorter, the smiles more polite. Some people looked away too quickly. She tried to ignore it. At her desk, a stack of documents waited, usual tasks, schedules, notes from the weekend. Everything seemed in order, except the silence around her had changed shape. Not quiet, not calm. It was the kind of silence that watched. At 9:15 a.m., she passed by the main lounge. A group of marketing associates were huddled near the espresso machine. As she walked by, the conversation paused. One woman cleared her throat. Another pretended to check her phone. Blake kept walking. She told herself it did not matter. She had work to do. At 11:02, Aiden Wells stepped out of his office. "Meeting room 6. Bring the printed campaign notes," he said. She followed. In the meeting, Blake sat quietly while Aiden presented the new Second Chances campaign to the senior leadership team. Faces around the table nodded. Some asked questions. One man leaned back, arms crossed, watching her more than the slides. After the meeting, Aiden turned to her. "Stay behind," he said. She waited as the others left the room. When the door closed, he spoke. "You are being watched." She looked up. "I know. Do not respond. I was not planning to." He paused, then added, "But do not shrink either." That was all. Back at her desk, she opened her inbox. A new message sat at the top. Subject concern regarding professional boundaries. Her stomach turned. The message was vague. No sender name, just internal feedback. The words were polite, but pointed. It questioned her unusual proximity to senior leadership. It mentioned optics and possible perceptions of favoritism. It suggested maintaining formal distance. Blake read it twice. She felt heat rise in her face. Not from guilt, but from the quiet violence in carefully chosen words. Later that day, she walked past the kitchenette. The same woman from her first week was there. The one who had warned her with a smirk. This time, the woman looked her straight in the eye. "You have his attention," she said. "That makes people uncomfortable." Blake did not answer. She knew what the woman meant and what she did not say. That attention was not normal and not safe. By Wednesday, the whispers were louder. Someone posted a blurry photo on the company's private message board, Aiden standing beside Blake during a client presentation. Nothing improper, just close, too close, according to some. Comments followed, nothing direct, just emojis, ellipses, the digital version of side eyes. Blake stayed quiet, but at night, she tossed and turned in bed. Her mind replayed every conversation, every glance, every shared silence. She knew there was no affair. No games. She also knew that silence could be misunderstood. And in a world that measured worth by perception, silence was dangerous. Thursday morning. Aiden arrived 10 minutes later than usual. His expression was unreadable. His suit darker than normal. He placed a folder on her desk. "This is the draft for the Internal Ethics Committee. Review it." Blake opened the folder. Her name was mentioned 3 times. In context, professional. But there it was. She looked up. "Why is this happening?" He answered without looking at her. "Because people prefer stories to facts, especially when they are bored. Why are you letting it spread? I am not." "Then why say nothing?" He paused. Then quietly, "Because if I defend you, it will only make it worse." She stared at him. Something inside her wanted to scream, but she did not. Instead, she asked, "Do you believe me?" He met her eyes. Yes. That was all he said, but something in his voice cracked for the first time. That night, Blake walked alone through Capitol Hill. The streets were wet again. She passed old bookstores, neon cafes, groups of students laughing under yellow lights. She stopped at a bench near Cal Anderson Park and sat down. A woman on a skateboard rolled past. A dog barked in the distance. Everything felt too loud and too far away. Blake pulled her coat tighter. She thought about the elevator. The moment when silence had felt like safety. Now, it felt like a wall. She thought about the looks, the comments, the way her own success had become suspect simply because it came near power. Not because she did anything wrong, but because she did not stay invisible. Aiden had given her space, respect, a voice, and the world had turned that into something ugly. The next morning, she walked into the building with steady steps. She was tired, but not broken. At 9:12, Aiden entered the office. She handed him the reviewed documents. He nodded. Then, before turning away, he said, "You do not owe them shame." She looked at him, quietly. "I am not giving it." He walked into his office, and this time, when he closed the door, it stayed slightly open, just enough to hear her breathing, just enough to say, "I am still here." The elevator opened with a soft chime. Blake Harper stepped out slowly. The air felt heavier than usual. Maybe it was the silence, or maybe it was the way people avoided her gaze now, as if eye contact might pull them into whatever story had been whispered behind closed doors. She walked past the open office space, toward her desk. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. On her desk was a small envelope, no name, just the company seal on the flap. She opened it with steady hands. Inside was a notice from Human Resources, not disciplinary, but formal. It invited her to an informal conversation scheduled for the next day. A check-in, it said, to discuss role alignment and employee perception. Blake stared at the paper. Her heart beat slower, not faster, like the moment before you fall, when the ground tilts, but nothing has touched you yet. She folded the paper and placed it in her drawer. At 9:04 a.m., Aiden walked in. He looked at her, briefly. "Any issues with the vendor contract?" he asked. She shook her head, reviewed and confirmed. He nodded, then stepped into his office. The door closed. She stared at the grain of her desk for a long time. That night, Blake did not go straight home. She took the long way, walking through narrow streets lined with maple trees. Leaves had started to fall, curling like paper at her feet. She ended up outside a small cafe. Warm light spilled onto the sidewalk. She stepped inside, ordered black coffee, and sat near the window. For a while, she just watched people pass. A couple argued softly. A boy in a hoodie offered half his sandwich to a man on the corner. Two women laughed so hard one had to sit down. Life continued, but inside her chest, something tightened. She took out a napkin and started to write. Not a resignation letter. Not yet. Just thoughts. She wrote in silence for almost an hour, then folded the napkin and slipped it into her coat pocket. Back home. She sat on the floor beside her bed. No lights, no music, just the faint sound of rain against the window. She thought of her aunt, the one who told her, "Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away, and sometimes it is staying." Blake did not sleep much that night. By morning, she had made a decision. Not loud, not final, but honest. At 7:43 a.m., she entered the office. She opened her email and typed a message. Subject transition request. She kept it short, direct. She asked for a one-on-one meeting with Human Resources. Not to defend, not to plead, just to say her side before stepping aside. She saved the draft, but did not send it. At 8:20, Aiden appeared at her desk. "You have a moment." She stood, followed him into his office. He closed the door, then sat down without speaking. The silence stretched. Finally, he said, "I received a memo this morning." She nodded. "So did I." He looked at her. I cannot fix this the way I want to. She nodded again. I know. But I can protect your record, your references, your exit path. She blinked. So, this is it. He looked away, then said softly, You deserve more than what this place has become. Her voice wavered. I worked hard. I stayed quiet. I never crossed a line. I know. I showed up, even when no one else would have. I know. Silence again. Then Blake asked, Do you want me to go? He answered with the truth. I do not know what is safe anymore. She stood still. That hurt more than she expected. She whispered, I am not asking to be protected. Just seen. His face shifted. Something broke there. Not loudly. Just enough. I see you, he said, then paused. And I will miss you. She nodded. Her throat burned. She left his office, went back to her desk, and sent the email. It was done. At 5:07 p.m., she gathered her things into a canvas bag. No one said goodbye. No one asked questions. She walked out the front door as quietly as she had come in. Outside, the wind had picked up. It smelled like pine and smoke and change. She looked up at the sky. No stars, just clouds. But still, she walked forward, not broken, just cleared. The office felt different without her. Aiden Wells sat at his desk, staring at the corner where Blake Harper used to sit. The chair was empty. Her notepad was gone. Even the scent of her chamomile hand lotion had faded from the room. The silence used to be his comfort. Now, it only echoed. He opened his laptop. Hundreds of emails waited, but he read none of them. Instead, he clicked on an old folder named Second Chances. The campaign she had helped build was still moving forward, but it felt hollow now. Polished, strategic, safe. Blake had seen something more in it, something honest. He missed that. He missed her, but he had no words left to offer. Miles across the city, in a quieter part of Capitol Hill. Blake sat at a coffee shop with a spiral notebook on the table. Her fingers tapped against a chipped ceramic mug. She had been jobless for 2 weeks, but this time, it did not feel like failure. It felt like breathing again. Every morning, she came to this cafe, ordered the cheapest coffee, and wrote, not for a job, not for approval, just for herself. At first, she wrote memories, then ideas, then scripts. One afternoon, she opened her laptop and recorded a voice note. Just a 5-minute story. Her story. She posted it on a small podcast platform under the name Barefaced. No intro music, no editing, just her voice. I used to think value came from how others saw me. Now I think it comes from how I stand when no one is watching. She did not expect anyone to listen, but they did. By the end of that week, her voice had been played 342 times. A few comments followed. I needed this. Thank you for putting it into words. This feels like something I never said out loud. Blake read the comments with quiet tears. Not sadness, not joy, just truth. She kept recording. 1 week became 3. 3 became 6. Each episode was short, raw, real. People started sending messages, stories of their own, fears, failures, hopes. She answered each one. And with every reply, she felt a little more whole. Back at Greylight Media, Aiden sat in a board meeting. The conversation droned on about conversion rates and content funnels. His mind was elsewhere. Since Blake's departure, 3 assistants had come and gone. None stayed longer than 5 days. Too fast, too quiet, too sharp. One had whispered, "You are not what I expected." Aiden had not replied. He no longer expected anyone to stay. Later that night, while scrolling absent-mindedly, he stumbled upon a podcast link shared by a former colleague on LinkedIn. He clicked out of habit and froze. It was her voice. He recognized it instantly, not because of how she spoke, but because of what she did not say. The space, the rhythm, the rawness. She was not trying to impress. She was just there, and that made it impossible to look away. The title of the episode was The Day I Left, and What Stayed With Me. He listened in silence. She spoke about leaving without bitterness, about learning to hold her own ground, about how kindness can feel like power when the world misunderstands you. She did not mention his name, but he felt every word land. When it ended, he sat still for a long time. Then he hit replay. 2 days later, a listener sent Blake a message. "I think someone important is listening." She smiled. She did not reply. Some things do not need answers, just acknowledgement. That weekend, she walked along the water near Gasworks Park. The air smelled like leaves and late summer. She found a quiet bench and sat with a book she never opened. Instead, she closed her eyes and let the breeze speak. She did not know what came next, but for the first time in years, she did not fear the unknown. She welcomed it. And somewhere, in a building with polished glass and tired hearts, Aiden opened a drawer and found a small folded note. It was Blake's, left behind in a drawer she never locked. It read, "Do not let the silence win." He folded it again and placed it in his wallet, not to remember her, but to remember himself. The mornings were getting colder. Blake Harper wrapped a scarf around her neck as she walked down the sidewalk. The cafe owner waved from inside. She waved back, smiled, and kept walking. She had found a rhythm. Wake early, walk, coffee, record. The podcast had reached over 10,000 plays now, still small by most standards, but to Blake, every number felt like a person leaning in, listening. She had not mentioned Aiden since the first few episodes, not directly, not even in code, but he stayed in her words, in the space between them. Today, she sat at her desk and stared at a blank page. Then, without thinking, she wrote, "If you ever wondered whether you mattered, you did, just not in the way the world measures it." She paused, then added, "Sometimes, the most unforgettable things are the ones we never said aloud." She saved it, but did not publish. Not yet. Later that evening, she received a message through the podcast platform. No sender name, no subject, just one sentence. "I did not let the silence win." She froze. The words were simple, but she knew. It was him. She sat still, the glow of the screen lighting her face. No reply was needed, at least not now. Instead, she pulled out her notebook and began writing again. This time, it was not a script. It was a letter. But not to be sent, just to be said. "Aiden, I never planned to remember you this much. I thought walking away meant letting go. But some things stay, quietly, without asking permission. You once said you could not fix it, that you did not know what was safe anymore. And I understood. What I never said was this: I was not looking for safety. I was looking for truth. And in you, I saw that. Even if it was hidden beneath 5 layers of silence. I hope you are still building things that matter. Even if no one claps. I hope you remember how to breathe between decisions. And I hope you know you were never the storm, just a window I once stood behind, waiting to be seen. Not for pity, not for praise, just seen. That was always enough." Blake. She folded the page, placed it inside her journal, then closed the cover slowly, like a door she did not want to slam. Outside, rain tapped gently on the glass. She listened to it for a long time, not because she was waiting for something, but because she was finally still enough to hear what remained. 3 days later, in an office 10 stories above the city, Aiden Wells read the words again. I did not let the silence win. He had not expected her to respond, and technically, she had not. But in that silence, he found something steady. Hope. Maybe. He had started walking in the evenings, just 10 blocks around the neighborhood. No headphones, no schedule, just steps. Sometimes. He passed a small bookstore near the park. Once, he saw a flyer in the window, barefaced live, one night only, real stories, real voices. He did not enter, he just stood there, then kept walking. But the next morning, he ordered 2 tickets, just in case. The lights in the small theater were dim. The stage was no more than a wooden platform, raised just a few inches above the floor. A single microphone stood in the center, waiting. Folding chairs creaked as people shifted in their seats. It was not a glamorous venue. No curtains, no spotlight, but it was honest, and that was enough. Backstage. Blake Harper stood quietly, holding a worn notebook. Her fingers traced the edge of the page she had folded and unfolded 20 times. It was the last night of the Barefaced series. 10 stories, 10 voices, 1 hour. She had curated every voice, every pause, every name on the program, except for one, her own. Tonight, she would close the night. She had not told anyone what she would say, not even herself. At 6:58 p.m., she peeked through the side curtain. The seats were nearly full. She scanned the crowd slowly, not for someone, just to breathe. And then she saw him. Second row, a dark blue jacket. Still, silent, Aiden Wells. He had come. She looked down, heartbeat steady but deep. No plan now, no script, just truth. At 7:05, the host stepped forward. Welcome to Barefaced, where truth does not need polish and stories do not need perfection. Applause filled the small room. Warm, no pressure, one by one. The speakers shared a mother's journey through grief, a man who spent years trying to say, I am sorry, a young woman who forgave her father without ever hearing the words. Each voice left something behind, an imprint. Blake stood backstage, listening, absorbing. And then, it was time. She stepped onto the stage, with soft steps. The room quieted. No music, no introduction, just her. She looked out, not at Aiden, not yet. Then she spoke. I once worked in a place where silence was the most expensive language, where power wore a suit and kindness hid behind it, where I learned that showing up is not the same as being seen. She paused. Someone coughed. A chair squeaked. But no one looked away. I sat beside a man who never asked about my past, but somehow, he listened when I said nothing. He gave me space, and that, to me, was louder than praise. Her voice did not shake, but it bent, gently, around the edges. Then the stories started, not the ones we told in meetings, the ones told in whispers, about who we were, what we meant to each other, why I did not belong. She looked at the floor for a second, then back up. I left before I broke, but I did not leave because of him. I left because the silence between us became too full of other people's voices. A deeper pause now. 1 second, 2, then, and still. I miss that silence. She looked toward the second row, straight into Aiden's eyes. He did not move, but she could tell he heard every word. She stepped back from the mic. The room was still. No applause, not yet. Then someone stood up. A woman, then a man, then more. The whole room rose, not in celebration, but in recognition. And then the applause came. Gentle, lasting, real. Blake nodded, just once, then walked off the stage. Backstage, she leaned against the wall, closed her eyes, breathed. When she opened them, he was standing there. Aiden. He said nothing. So she did. You came? Yes. A pause. Then he added, You spoke? Yes. Silence again. But not the old kind. This one had something inside it. Then he reached into his coat, pulled out a folded slip of paper. It was the note she had left behind in his drawer. Do not let the silence win. He handed it to her. She unfolded it. It felt different now, like a beginning instead of an ending. Then he said, There is a position, not at Greylight. Something new. She raised an eyebrow. I thought you did not recruit. I do not. This is not recruiting. Then what is it? He hesitated, then spoke. An invitation. She smiled. Soft. Steady. Let me think about it. Take your time. They stood in that quiet hallway, full of folding chairs, half-empty water bottles, and stories that still echoed off the walls. Neither needed to fill the silence, because finally, it had become a space they both belonged to. Fall turned to winter. The last of the leaves had fallen, leaving the trees bare but still standing. The wind was sharper now, but it carried a quiet kind of beauty. Blake Harper stood outside the bookstore on Pine Street, a folder tucked under one arm. She watched people pass. Some looked rushed, some looked tired, some looked like her. Once, inside, the lights were warm. A poster by the window still displayed her name. Barefaced, now streaming season 2. She never thought it would last this long, but it had. Each week, more stories arrived, some from strangers, some from people she would never meet, but all of them real. She no longer read them to be inspired. She read them to remember that truth. Even the quiet kind always finds a place to land. That afternoon, she met with a publisher for the first time. A small one. No promises, but kind eyes. After the meeting, she walked toward the water. The same bench at Gasworks Park waited. The same skyline. But she was different, not louder, just steadier. She took out a notebook and opened to the last page. She had written it weeks ago, but never read it aloud. Now. She whispered it to the wind. Healing is not about forgetting. It is about remembering without breaking. And sometimes, the people who leave give us something that stays. She closed the notebook and smiled. Behind her, footsteps approached. She turned. It was Aiden. No suit, just a coat. No papers, just presence. He sat beside her, not too close. She looked out at the water. You found the bench, she said. I listened. He replied. Silence followed, but not the old silence. Not the waiting kind. This one held space. After a moment, he asked, What now? She answered softly, I keep walking. He nodded. Me too. They sat there, saying nothing more. Because not all endings need words. Some just need peace and presence, and the quiet understanding that maybe, just maybe, this was not the end, just a better beginning. Sometimes, the loudest moments in life happen in silence. We spend years working hard, showing up, and caring more than we speak. But still, we are overlooked or misunderstood. This story is not just about a woman in an office. It is about all of us, about anyone who has ever felt unseen, unheard, or unfairly judged. It reminds us that dignity does not come from a title. It comes from how we choose to stand, especially when no one is watching. There will be days when walking away feels like giving up, but sometimes leaving is the most powerful thing we can do. Not because we are weak, but because we know our worth. And sometimes people return, not to fix the past, but to meet us in a better version of the present. So if you have ever doubted your voice, let this be your reminder. You do not need to shout to be strong. You only need to speak when it matters, and mean it. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched your heart or made you think, please like the video, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that speak quietly but deeply. Your support helps us keep telling what matters. See you in the next story.